Just minutes ago, inside a packed press room of NATO in Norway, something happened that no one in Washington was prepared for. A single question cut through the usual diplomatic language. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it forced a moment of truth that exposed something deeper, something far more significant than a simple exchange between a journalist and a world leader. And when Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney responded, there was no applause, no reaction, just silence. Because in that moment, everyone in that room understood that what was being discussed wasn't just policy. It was power. It was influence. It was the future structure of global alliances. And at the center of it all, whether directly mentioned or not, was Donald Trump. This wasn't just another press conference. It was a signal that something is changing inside NATO, and that change is being driven by forces much larger than any single country. To understand why this moment matters, you have to understand where it happened. Northern Norway, a place that for decades sat quietly on the edge of global attention. Remote, cold, strategically important, but rarely discussed in mainstream conversations. That has changed. Today, Northern Norway sits on the front line of one of the most important geopolitical transformations of our time. Because the Arctic is no longer isolated. It is opening. And with that opening comes opportunity and conflict. For most of modern history, the Arctic was considered inaccessible, a frozen barrier, a region too harsh, too distant, and too expensive to matter in global strategy. But climate change is rewriting that reality. Ice that once blocked entire regions year-round is now retreating. Shipping routes that were once impossible are becoming viable. And suddenly, distances between major global markets are shrinking. A cargo ship traveling from Asia to Europe, for example, could cut its journey significantly by passing through Arctic routes instead of traditional paths like the Suez Canal. That alone changes global trade. But trade is only part of the story. Beneath the Arctic lies something even more valuable: energy, oil, natural gas, rare earth minerals, resources that are not just profitable, but essential for the future of technology, defense, and global industry. These are the materials needed for everything from smartphones to advanced military systems, and they are becoming more accessible every year. This is why the Arctic has become a focal point for global powers. Russia understood this early. Over the past decade, it has built a massive military infrastructure across its Arctic territory, including air bases, missile systems, radar networks, and the largest fleet of icebreakers in the world, giving it unmatched access and mobility in the region. China, on the other hand, took a different path. It doesn't have Arctic territory, but that hasn't stopped it from investing billions into Arctic-related projects, research stations, infrastructure partnerships, and shipping initiatives. By calling itself a near-Arctic state, China is making one thing clear: it intends to be part of the future of the region. And then there's the United States. Under normal circumstances, the U.S. would be expected to lead in Arctic strategy, especially as a key member of NATO. But in recent years, particularly under the influence of Donald Trump, the approach has been different. More unpredictable, more transactional, and more focused on immediate leverage than long-term alliance stability. Trump's public interest in acquiring Greenland was one of the most visible examples. To many, it seemed unusual, even unrealistic, but in geopolitical terms, it sent a powerful message that territory, resources, and strategic positioning in the Arctic were not off limits, even among allies. For countries like Canada, this was not just rhetoric, it was a warning. Because Canada sits directly within this evolving landscape. Nearly half of its landmass lies in northern regions, and its Arctic coastline is vast. Its access to critical resources is significant. This is not a theoretical issue. It is a national priority. For decades, Canada operated under a stable assumption that its partnership with the United States, particularly through NORAD, would provide long-term security in the Arctic. And for a long time, that assumption held. But today, that certainty is fading. That is the context in which Mark Carney walked into that press room. He wasn't just answering a question, he was addressing a shift that many leaders understand, but few are willing to say openly. When the question came whether the United States could still be trusted in Arctic security, it forced that reality into the open. Carney's answer was careful, measured, strategic. He said, yes. But his explanation told a different story. He spoke about the past, about cooperation, about systems that have worked for decades. But when he spoke about the future, his focus changed. Canada is increasing its defense capabilities, expanding its Arctic presence, investing tens of billions of dollars into infrastructure, surveillance, and military readiness. And perhaps most importantly, diversifying its partnerships. This is the key. Canada is not moving away from the United States. It is moving away from dependence on any single power. By strengthening ties with European nations, Norway, Germany, and others, Canada is building a network, a system that can function even if one component becomes unreliable. This is not a break from NATO. It is an evolution within it. And this is where the broader implication becomes clear. Because Canada is not the only country thinking this way. Across Europe, similar patterns are emerging: increased defense spending, stronger regional cooperation, and greater emphasis on self-reliance. The Arctic is accelerating this shift because it combines everything: resources, trade routes, military positioning, geographic advantage. And as competition increases, so does the need for control. Whoever controls key Arctic routes can influence global trade. Whoever controls Arctic resources can influence global energy markets. And whoever maintains a strong military presence can enforce both. This is why the stakes are so high, and this is why that moment in Norway mattered, because it revealed something that is rarely said out loud, that even within alliances, trust is no longer unconditional. It must be supported, reinforced, and backed by independent capability. And that is exactly what Canada is building. So, the real question is no longer whether the United States remains powerful. It does. The real question is whether other nations are preparing for a world where that power is no longer predictable. Because if they are, then what we are witnessing is not just a policy shift. It is a transformation in how global power is structured. And the Arctic is where that transformation is becoming visible first. Because in the end, this isn't just about ice, or territory, or resources. It's about the future.